Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting for December 3rd, 2019. A little bit of housekeeping for those that haven't had the pleasure of attending one of these before. First of all, if you would silence your cell phones, we'd greatly appreciate that. And after we do the roll call and approval of the minutes, we go through the items one by one. The way it works is first the city staff presents on an item, then the floor is open just to the commission for technical questions. Once we've had our share of questions, we close that and open it up to the public. If you have a question or an opinion, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address so we have it for the minutes. Also be prepared to answer a question or two if we have one. And after public comment is closed, we bring it back for discussion and a vote. And also, I want to note now that for the commissioners, workshop 1 has been canceled. So we have 3 workshops, now we're down to 2. With that,
Downtown
the
Casey's
roll
been
call.
also.
Thomas Wojtek,
Here.
Kathleen Pratt,
Here.
Mamadou Koulibaly,
Here.
Lindsay Erickson, Michael Ford, John Hintz,
Present?
John Kiefer,
Here.
Lori Palmieri, Thomas Perry,
Here.
Justin Mitchell,
Here.
Derek Groth.
Here. All right, thank you. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from November 19th. Do we have any corrections, additions, deletions, et cetera?
Motion to approve. Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Moving on to item number 1. Do we have any site inspections?
Which one is this one?
Doesn't look like, we do, okay.
Kind of my area.
We accept the staff report as part of the record,
Go through that and
and on to you guys. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
So, as you all will recall, this item actually came as a workshop at the last Plan Commission meeting. So you kind of got a sense of the overall plans for the site and how they've scaled the concept back a little bit in terms of scope. So this is a conditional use permit request for outdoor storage at 3300 Medalist. There is a subject site there outlined in blue. It was 2 parcels. It has actually been combined. Jeff in our office received a lot combination request, so it's 1 parcel, a lot of industrial around it. Oshkosh Defense is leasing that building from Smet, and they do vehicle inspection there. 2 conditional use permit requests came through last year through this body and the Common Council for approval, both for outdoor storage. 1 outdoor storage lot was up on the north here of the site, northwest of the site here, corner there. And then there was another smaller lot, I believe, down towards the center portion of the site here. They are looking here, as you can see on the site plan, to fence this in here and convert about 24 stalls of parking to outdoor storage. They are also going to do this in tandem with fencing off the rear or the east side of the building for security purposes. So this would all be surrounded with an 8-foot solid fence with 3 strands of barbed wire for security. That is code compliant. We do not foresee any issues with this. They are not proposing any changes to the parking, impervious surface ratio on the site, landscaping, lighting, signage, building elevations. None of that's changing. The only thing they're doing is converting a portion of the parking to storage and then fencing in this rear portion of the site. That fencing there would be permitted by right, so we're not really concerned with that. There's just a fencing specification there. Again, some detail for the fencing. And then staff is in support of this. Like I said, it came to you as a workshop before. We do not have any concerns. The applicant, we just ask that they meet these conditions here. So completely enclosing the storage area with an 8-foot tall solid fencing. The only thing I would say from the site plan that we want to note is that the area, what I was thinking is that this area should be fenced completely separate from any access areas. We don't want any storage spilling out into these areas if it's not designated as outdoor storage. So to fence this lot off separately and maybe have it gated so that you can access it. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. That was one of the main things we noticed on the site plan. And then, so they would submit a revised site plan. We have to verify that the parking counts are not going to be rendered non-compliant with the code. They did submit a revised narrative for us to review today, so we did get that. It's just not in your packets. Just a narrative asking for what the request is so that we have that on file. And then the last condition would be that no changes would be made to the existing access drives. That was a carryover from the earlier CUP requests. And with that, we recommend approval.
Thank you, sir. Technical questions regarding this item?
I'll just note real quick for a reminder to Plan Commission, This is kind of part one of a two-phase request the applicants are proposing that we discussed at the last Plan Commission meeting. This will meet their immediate needs for the site. And then in spring, they're anticipating coming back with an additional CUP to kind of build out that site as they had shown during the workshop.
Lovely. Seeing no technical questions, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Aye.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Fisher with Fisher & Associates Architects. I designed the layout. My address is
Yep.
my address is W13654 Balsam Lake Road, Crivitz, Wisconsin. And I guess of the conditions, the only concern that I have would be to enclose that separately, because typically when they install gates and everything, they put power gates and everything into it. So our plan, our initial request was for a much larger scope, and we to include a car parking lot and another large storage area. So this is an interim plan that we can implement now without having to go through full site plan approval. Under their government contract, they have to secure the vehicles, and
Right.
this meets that need. So this meets the immediate need, and so we plan to break ground in the spring on the much larger layout. At that time, I thought we then can address any overflow of storage or anything as they get their actual layout done of how they're going to use all the actual spaces. So I guess the only objection I would have would be to require that they install this additional gate that would likely be taken out after only a couple months of service.
Yeah, I think we could, from a staff perspective, we could maybe add a condition that if no additional development takes place within the next 6 months, that gate be installed. Leave them the flexibility, because we know they intend to move forward with that additional project. But if something would change and that project never moves forward, then I think it would make sense that gate be required. Would that be something that could make sense? You're not required to do it now, but if something's changed, you don't do the expansion, then the gate be installed.
Yep, that makes sense.
All right, do we have any questions for the petitioner? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. We'll go back to the commission. Do we have a motion to adopt the findings, et cetera? John?
Just wanted to ask, does that mean we're adding another amendment or altering an amendment, or
Yeah, we would.
just to clarify before I,
Right.
Yeah.
How would you word that? You worded it very well when you just talked about it in 90 seconds.
Just thinking we can probably add it
Hold the
right.
tape.
We can probably add it directly
Number
to
one? Or
item 1.
how would
And
you-
we'll just word it that gate should be installed within 6 months,
so
or as part of phase 2 development.
motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report and amended by Mark.
And I'll add that language then in.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, discussion. Seeing none, let's call the roll and move on.
Erickson? Aye. Hintz?
Aye.
Kiefer?
Aye.
Perry?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Groth?
Aye.
Prop? Kohlvalley?
Aye.
Wojtek?
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right, on we move to item number 2. Public hearing, zone change from central mixed-use district to central mixed-use district with the plan development overlay, approval of a general development plan and specific implementation plan for a light manufacturing, retail, and educational facility at 717 Oregon Street. Do we have any site inspections for that place? Okay, we got a couple people that did that. We accept the staff report as part of the record. Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a zone change request, as well as a request for a general development plan and specific implementation plan to establish a light manufacturing, retail, and educational facility. So the subject site is located at the northwest corner of Oregon Street and West 8th Avenue. It is the former Costco's appliance store, and the surrounding area is primarily commercial and mixed uses, along with some residential uses to the west. So here's an aerial view of the subject site. Again, it's in the corner of Oregon and West 8th Avenue. Here's a street view of the site and an eagle view of the subject site. So the petitioner is requesting to use the existing site for production of anti-venom, educational displays, and minimal sales. And this particular land use does not really fit any specific land use in our zoning ordinance, so they are requesting a plan development overlay to allow for a base standard modification to allow for the proposed land use. And here's kind of how the interior of the building will be. There are no exterior changes to the building, but the interior will include about 40% of the building for venom production, 10% for lab processing, and 50% for educational displays. So they will have venomous snakes and scorpions on the site where they will be extracting venom. The facility will also be used for school field trips and will be open to the public. And according to the applicant, they will have 4 staff members who will park on West 8th Avenue, and the school groups that visit the site will be dropped off in buses and parked off-site. There was a neighborhood meeting held on September 25th, and the neighbors were supportive of the proposal. Also, UW Oshkosh did send a letter as they are in support of the proposed use and will be working with the applicant. And they will be just replacing the face on the old castle sign with their sign, and that's really the only exterior change for the site. So staff recommends approval of the rezone, GDP, and SIP with the findings in your staff report and the condition of a base standard modification to allow a light manufacturing, retail, and educational facility within the central mixed-use district.
Thank you, sir. Technical questions? I wonder if they'll charge for people to have their photo taken in front of the sign? I don't know.
One other item to add. I know we have the letter of support in here from UW Oshkosh. I know the applicant has also been working with the school district on some curriculum-based programming for the Oshkosh School District as well.
Any technical questions, folks? All right. Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? All right. Back to the commission. Do we have a motion to adopt the findings, et cetera?
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendation as stated in the staff report.
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
One item. The terrace along 8th Avenue is asphalt. Is that specific section city-owned, or is that an area where the city, if the property owner was willing, where the city could potentially return that back to a grass terrace across the street? It's grass, looks much nicer. The terrace in front of that building there is a very unattractive, non-beneficial asphalt.
So that terrace is obviously within the public right-of-way, so it'd be under city jurisdiction. I guess Justin, I'm gonna have to repeat the question for him, but basically Justin is asking potential about maybe returning some green space along the 8th Avenue terrace where it's pretty much concrete from back a curb all the way to building.
Well, if it was concrete, it might look all right, but it looks like it was just, it's just plopped asphalt. And this seems to be a good opportunity to address a minor.
Yeah, and if we try to get green space in the terrace as much as possible, I didn't necessarily think with this project being what it was, being 95% internal construction, that we'd be working with that, because that brings in a whole new set of challenges with right-of-way permitting and stuff like that. But in general, we do try to get green space in the terraces as often as possible.
So, yeah, not as a condition of this moving forward, kind of a separate item. I just thought since there's activity here at this particular lot, and maybe you have a willing home or property owner who would be fully supportive of it, I don't know.
If they're willing to do that, we'll work with them to make sure they get the necessary permits to, remove that and install it as a grass or green surface.
So you're talking here, Justin. There's like some asphalt in here.
Yeah, I mean, if you it's very blurry, but it's wide enough where two properties, two plats up, there's trees that are growing in the terrace. And I'm not suggesting that you needed to do that, but at a minimum, it just seemed like a good opportunity to. It's one of those spots where it's just a small strip, but it's super ugly, where just faded, failing, plopped asphalt. plopped between a curb and sidewalk where you could have decent lawn.
Looks like some work was done there.
Yeah, no criticism of why. I mean, I don't know the history of it or really care. Just if he's willing and you guys are willing, it might be a good opportunity.
There we are. That strip.
Yeah, and you could go across the street there, across 8th.
So it's within the
Looks
public
real nice.
right of way, so we couldn't make the petitioner do it?
No, I don't think that's what. he
Not
said,
tying
but-
it in,
Yeah,
more
no.
so, you guys should maybe look at doing that.
Kathy, did you have a comment? No. Any other comments, folks?
Just one other
Go ahead.
thing, I'm excited to see this building be utilized again. I think it's a really kind of unique, interesting use of that has quality educational value, potential health value, and I'm really excited to see this possibly move forward.
Being in that building, be like living in Florida. All right, John.
I just want to piggyback a little bit on Justin. This is exciting, and the fact that this is such a unique place. If there's one thing we love to do in Oshkosh, we like to talk about how we're special. We have so many different unique things in the city, and this is just yet another one to add. So,
Do the marketing.
Snake site.
All right, let's call a roll there, Mia.
Erickson.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Vince.
aye.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
Kulabali.
Aye.
Voitek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Now on to item number 3. A general development plan and specific implementation plan approval for automotive sales and display and an automotive service facility located at south of 3365 South Washburn Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, did we do any site inspections out there?
Go ahead.
All right, and then we accept the staff report as part of the record. Now it's you.
It's a vacant parcel of land located on South Washburn Street. It is zoned SMU PD. Here's a aerial view of the subject site. It's located south of the existing Bergstrom dealerships. Here's the site plan. So the applicant is requesting a GDP and SIP for auto sales and display and an auto body shop. So that includes a building with vehicle service bays on the south and west portions of the building, as well as associated parking lots surrounding the building. It has one access point from South Washburn Street to the parking lot, and the parking lot has 602 parking spaces. The applicant indicates that 158 of those spaces will be for customer and employee parking, and the remaining 444 spaces will be for sales and display. There are 2 drive aisles connecting the parking lot to the Bergstrom parking lot to the north of the site, so there will be a need for a cross-access agreement for those drive aisles. There is a pylon sign shown on the site plan that's within the front yard setback, so that pylon sign will need to be moved back to meet the 25-foot front yard setback requirement. So here's the rendering of their proposed pylon sign. It does include a 124 square foot EMC. However, in 2012, a plan development amendment was approved for the Bergstrom site immediately to the north, and that included a 1,165 square foot EMC with a condition that no more EMCs could be put up on the Bergstrom Import Supercenter. Code allows a maximum of 100 square feet for EMCs per property, so the existing sign that was put up previously is it the equivalent of about 11.65 properties worth of EMC square footage. So staff is recommending a condition that no EMCs be installed on the site, and the finalized sign plans have to meet the SMU district signage requirements. Here's the landscape plan. As far as building foundation landscaping, it did not show any on the front side of the building facing the street, and code requires 50% of the foundation landscaping to be on that side. They will need to relocate some of the landscaping to meet that requirement. As far as the parking lot landscaping, there are a couple of, actually 4 parking rows that are missing the intermediate landscaping. So code requires a maximum of 180 feet without a landscape island, so they will need to put landscape islands in those parking rows to meet that requirement. As far as street frontage landscaping, they are shy of the 50% of the required points being devoted to medium trees, so we are requesting that they meet that requirement. They're also proposing 20 autumn blaze maples, which according to code are a species to use sparingly, so we are requesting that they look at changing out those trees for trees that are allowable by code. Here's the photometric plan. So the majority of the site does meet the 0.4 foot candles required for parking areas, except there are a few parking stalls on the north side of the parking lot, as well as along the drive aisle that are show less than 0.4 foot candles. They'll need to add additional lighting to meet that requirement. Also along the north property line, there are a few sections that are exceeding the 0.5 foot candles at the property line. The staff is supportive of a base standard modification to allow that additional light trespass as it's just going to the neighboring parking lot to the north. So we don't see any concerns with that. The proposed light poles show a 24-foot height, mounting height for the light fixtures. In the SMU district, the max height is 20 feet. So we are requesting that they reduce that to 20 feet. And here is a color image, or color images of the proposed building facades. So the applicant is requesting a BSM as the east, north, and south facades will not meet the requirement of 50% Class 1 materials. They are proposing aluminum composite metal panels as an alternate Class 1 material on the east elevation, which is the front, as well as the front portions of the north and front portions of the south elevations. They're also proposing precast concrete in lieu of split-face CMU in order to meet requirements of the state energy code. Staff is supportive of the BSM to allow front and side facades not predominantly clad in Class 1 materials, with a condition that the metal panels they're proposing be consistent with the neighboring Bergstrom buildings in the area. And staff did note that with the requested base standard modifications, they are proposing additional landscaping over the minimum code requirement to offset those requests. And here's the renderings of the facade. So here's the east elevation, north elevation, west rear, and the south elevation. And staff recommends approval of the GDP and SIP with the findings in your staff report and the conditions that all vehicles parked outdoors shall be operable condition for safe and legal performance on public right-of-way. No EMC signs shall be installed on the site. Final signage plans shall meet signage standards for the SMU district and be reviewed by the Department of Community Development. A base standard modification to allow lighting levels to exceed 0.5 foot candles along the north property line. A base standard modification to allow front and side building facades to be clad in less than 50% Class 1 materials. And metal panels on east, north, and south elevations shall be consistent in material and appearance with the neighboring Bergstrom buildings. The final landscaping plan shall be revised to meet code requirements, and the final landscaping plan should be approved by the Department of Community Development.
Right, thank you, sir. Technical questions? Yes, Michael.
So, am I understanding that, excuse me, I have a cold, in case you can't tell. EMCs are allowed under code, did you say?
So under code, current code requirements are one electronic message center per property at a maximum of 100 square feet.
Okay. Okay, so this is going beyond what
So-
code is required. Is it, I guess, is it fair to say that we're trading the addition,
So-
existence of any EMC for
So-
allowing more class?
So previously, they had come forward and requested an 1,165 square foot EMC at the property immediately to the north of this. And it was approved under the justification that instead of each one of their dealership sites having their own EMC, they would aggregate that into a single location. That single location was approved at substantially larger than each individual one could have had. Staff's opinion is that should hold for this additional site, instead of now adding additional EMCs where they essentially were given the size of an EMC that would equate to over 11 developments worth of signs. I think they have 5 or 6 developments there. So if each were allowed their own, they'd have 600-ish allowed. We're still at almost 1,200. Our opinion is we should continue that same philosophy. They were given that larger one. We don't need an additional one.
So this is based on a previous decision. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Other technical questions, Kath?
Yeah, the 50% Class 1 materials. What materials are the other Bergstrom buildings made of?
Yep, so, and I know the
What's their
applicants are here, so we can, I don't know their percentage, but I know the metal panel you see is what the front of most of the other Bergstrom buildings are clad in. That's why staff was okay with it. Essentially, we're matching the same development pattern as already been established along there, and we can pull up street view so you can see some of those other buildings.
Okay, so we've already approved.
Some of those were obviously
metal
developed
cladding
prior
on-
to our current code requirements.
okay.
So this is more of a consistency with what's already been established. I think the metal panel they're proposing is a pretty high quality type of material. But staff really looked at it as matching kind of that existing development pattern they've already established.
Okay, so there's basically no class 1 material.
The glass on the front of it is class 1. Let me go back to elevations kind of here for you. So all the glass is considered class 1.
Okay,
So that is the only technically code requirement, class 1. The metal panel is not class 1 under the current code.
okay, but it's the same as the.
But it's a similar
buildings.
material that's been used on the other
Okay,
buildings.
all right, thank you.
Tom?
What is the percentage of class 1 now?
Do you have?
Yeah, it's on there. The east facade would be
East is, I can't quite read that.
64?
64 is the metal panels.
The metal panel 64,
And the glazing is, I think, 34?
34. So about 16% under for the east facade.
Other questions? Okay. Anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission. Do we have a motion to adopt the findings?
Motion to adopt findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second. All right, discussion. Go ahead, Kathy.
I'm presuming that Bergstrom will be okay with our very specific changes. And if they aren't, they'll
Yeah. We have,
deal
we
with
have,
it at site inspection.
yeah, we have not heard anything from them on if they have an issue with what we've proposed.
Okay, good.
Okay, who is next? Go ahead, Tom.
We're constantly making exceptions to the 50% rule, and we know that it's a good quality material, but I'm not sure that I can subscribe to the, because all the other places are that way, philosophy, especially since the code has changed. So I'm on the fence on this one right now because still in the 30% range and not even in the 40% range. And as I said, we're constantly making exceptions, and they don't want that to be the rule.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I'll respectfully disagree with my good friend Thomas Perry. But I think it's worth, I want to state this so we're not creating a precedent here, but I think this is a good example where in general, I think as a body, we're not in the business of making our folks go above and beyond what's allowed in code, but we're doing so in this case by getting rid of the full EMC because there was a past agreement with the same owner, which is essentially a continuation of that previous development. And same deal here, as I've been a stickler as much as anybody else about class 1 materials and not bargaining down our base. But I do think the fact that it's consistent with a existing building that was approved under a previous code makes it a logical course of action.
Thank you, sir. Other comments or questions? Go ahead,
Just a
Justin.
quick question. One of the things that you've often mentioned in past is we do a trade, or if we give something, we get something. What, is there something that you're getting in this
So
scenario?
that's why we identified in the staff report, their overall landscaping plan exceeds base code requirements by about 25%. So they are adding additional greenery to the site. That is how staff felt comfortable with the base standards that they were requesting, is they are going above and beyond those minimum code requirements for landscaping.
Got it. Thanks.
Other thoughts, opinions? All right, let's call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
I
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Crop,
All right.
Kulabali,
Aye.
Wojtak.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Okay. Let us move on to item number 4. Approval of the Lakeshore Park Master Plan. There's not, I suppose there could be a site inspection if anybody drove down.
We
to
can
the
look
park.
from the bridge and Oshkosh Avenue as we drive
Three
through there.
times a day?
And I, yeah,
Well, I
I
go through
accept,
that
we
area
accept
too.
the staff report as part of the record, so it's on to y'all.
So I'm going to keep my comments relatively brief. The Parks Department is here along with the consultant they work with on preparing this plan. They do have a presentation directly related to the plan, but this is the Lakeshore Master Park Plan as a result of the changes that were made to the former golf course site. It's approximately 70 acres in remaining property. It's largely a passive park. The park is kind of split in two halves, kind of the western park and the eastern park. Each of those have some specific recommendations they're making. Project plan is kind of broken into a summary, public process, site analysis, master plan, and then I think that's something that's really unique to this park plan, and I give the Parks Department a lot of credit for some forward thinking here, is they broke this down into a phasing and budget targets of what it may take to achieve this overall plan. So I really want to give them a lot of credit for that forward thinking and say, here's what it's going to take to get here, not just show us the plan, but identify exactly what's going to be needed to get there. So this is the western half of the park. This is the eastern half of the park. Staff does recommend approval of the Lakeshore Park Master Plan. It is in consistency with our comp plan. And I will turn it over to Ray.
Good evening, and we're excited to be here. This is a process that, as you recall, actually started back in March when we introduced Smith Group at the State of the City, and they started to receive some public input at that point. I think throughout the whole process, we've had a lot of public input, which was very good for the process. I think between the boards and committees that we either had joint meetings with the Advisory Parks Board, the POCO survey to give us input, I think the public had a number of opportunities to give us input. I'm going to introduce Greg Calipino from Smith Group. He's going to walk you through the presentation, and both Greg and Nathan with Smith Group were very instrumental in this whole process. So.
Thank you, and it's great to be back, and it's great to be at the end of the process or the beginning of the process, depending on where you stand. Of hopefully, this is, we do plans with the hope that we get to someday run and play in our parks as well too. So this is the beginning, but the end of this master planning process. So we'll walk you through the design, but also a little bit of a kind of a tour of how we got there. I know a lot of the folks in the room were part of that process, but those who weren't, give a little bit of history lesson over the last 8 months or so. So we'll kind of walk through kind of fairly quickly the process and how we got there, and then spend a lot more time on the actual plan and some of the details of that, as well as was pointed out, some of the phasing and budget looking forward. So it's always good to, when you sort of start a process, we've made it to very close to the end here. 3-phase process, again, spent a lot of time really listening and learning in the early part, really in spring. A couple of important touch points, in particular the June public visioning meeting, but along, as Ray pointed out, with some of the online survey and some of the, at each step we were trying to find different ways to listen and learn that really guided the concept alternatives, which we'll kind of walk through, and then ultimately the preferred concept, which made it into the master plan. So we're very close. So again, we try to find as many ways as possible. So kind of early on in the process, back in the June public meeting, at the very high level guiding principles, programming, trying to get a sense of, again, how is this best going to connect with the community, their wishes. We started to see some patterns really through all the mechanisms, whether it was sort of hands-on things like this, when you started hearing messaging about sustainable practices and the water and landscape and trails and passive recreation. We're starting to hear that very loud and clear with just sort of the hands-on exercises. The POLCO, we had great response with that, 429 different responses locally based, which is fantastic, good range from ages, families, et cetera, too. So again, a nice effort and good cross-section there. And again, similar patterns. So this was really kind of looking at what kind of amenities folks wanted, and we really started to see a very strong preference for, again, nature restoration, trails, passive rec, but also it's just fix and build basic infrastructure, for the park, but also start to, again, a little because you have sports and things elsewhere. This was a place kind of to focus a little more on those passive, quieter things, picnicking, small events, things like that. In terms of what folks would do, similar, a strong preference for trails, walking, running, biking, things like that. Again, those passive activities, picnicking, some of the events, whether, again, was hosting some of the larger things that you do citywide or just sort of smaller special types of things as well, too. But also, some voice here about land and water-based, being, whether it was a place to land a kayak, things like that as well, too. So recognizing the water location versus some of the other parks that you have that may not have those opportunities. And generally through comment cards throughout the process, again, kind of really it then supported those same themes, trails, nature, accessibility, but also I think this as a place to express ourselves from a public art, identity perspective, but also culture and history as well, too, that this was a place to sort of bring that all together into one location, again, where really the whole community could come together and celebrate all of that, too. So nice themes throughout those input tools. So at the end of all of that, it really kind of started to see some basic themes. Again, prioritizing passive recreation, thinking about how to turn a golf course, which is a very quiet space, into something a little more about native habitats, ecosystems, public art. Again, a place to gather as a community and to respect that history and culture. In particular, again, there was some good history on the site, but again, because of the large nature and location, a place to maybe celebrate that even more. And so part of our process we listened, but we also did our due diligence in terms of analysis. Because of our location on the water, we wanted to learn a little bit about that and see how we could, take that next chapter. Being on Lake Butamore, the river, was an important thing, but also, there's a series of lakes on the site as part of the golf course. Looking back at history about, why they're there, how it worked. They were a little more of a connected system when this was a little more natural shoreline, so trying to learn a little bit about how that might inform the design. Whether we actually physically connected those or start to at least bring that style into the park design, as you'll see some of the alternatives, that was definitely a driver. Again, we also want to make sure that we looked at this park in the broader context. So we weren't repeating things. We were learning whether that was looking at boat launches or other recreation. In this case, it was looking at history and culture, again, how we could fit into that broader fabric along your waterways. And starting to look at some of the physical patterns out there as well of what do we want to kind of keep doing, or what do we want to maybe start thinking differently as this transforms from a golf course, which was really an interesting. You're on a lake, but because of the way the golf course was aligned, it was really sort of a parallel landscape to the lake because you went back and forth on your golf holes. And so the trees are kind of running parallel to the shoreline. So as you approach the lake, you're not really seeing the lake as much. So think about how we might turn that. So now that the focus is a little more on the lake. Also recognizing with the location along 41, there's places where, in particular the west side of the park, where it's very loud because of the road noise. But you also, when you start to think about the topography of the golf course, we were on our tours, when you got into the low areas, it got quieter. When you're on top of the hills, it was louder. So how do we start to think about that as an opportunity that we can start to bring more of that public use to the side of the park, but also think about from those, again, that desire to have passive, quiet recreation. So landforms start to become not only just a visual thing, but also perhaps an experiential thing to make this a more pleasurable experience along 41. As well as being some of the identity along 41, knowing how many people will see this park while they drive over that bridge. We also, because this parcel with the Oshkosh Corporation development in the middle, you've got a lot of edges, and both inside the park as well as adjacent, with Rainbow and Mary Jewel. How do we sort of think about this as, even though they may be individual parks or parcels, that really kind of comes together as one? So looking at those edges, whether it's the lake edge, park edges, neighborhood edges, et cetera, of how we can maximize the qualities that we want, that are positive, maybe mitigate some others, and again, think about knitting this all together into one great space at this confluence of waters. And because what you have today in a lot of ways is almost a tale of two parks, with kind of an east and a west lobe with Oshkosh in the middle. So this was sort of what we experienced in our analysis. So kind of to tackle that, we had some general tools of the trade as designers, threads, places, and moments. Threads are the things that tie together a space, whether that's artwork, trails, habitats. We'll kind of walk through a few of these. Places are, again, those great, locations that you sort of go to celebrate as a community. And those moments are those sort of special places, whether it's an overlook or interpretation, signage, things like that as well, too. So some of the things, again, based on the feedback we received in the process, as well as just solid hard work as designers. One of those things that we kind of heard loud and clear that could be a connecting thread would be the habitat and water itself. Going back to the history of your connected waters, a desire to sort of leverage what you had out there, nature, habitat, walking trails, things like that too. So we really felt that the system of water and landscape along it could be one of those things that really tied everything together. Again, everyone loved the idea of trails, so that's another great way to do it. Think about the, a very robust hierarchy of trails, whether some of those are, they're all accessible. Are there some that, they're all paved, but are there some that could be a little more nature-based, maybe some boardwalks, things like that, that are unique to where they're at in the park. So that as a pedestrian, I have a different experience every day. I've got long loops, I've got short loops, I've got some that are over water, some that are through different landscapes. So think about that as a connective and interpretive experience. And thinking about how, again, we activate a park of this size. Again, recognizing those sort of two lobes, the east and the west, you start to think about a need for multiple structures, perhaps. If you have multiple things going on, you're a pedestrian out there, it starts to rain, things like that. So some of the buildings that you might have out there would be more passive, open shelters. Up here, one of the features that kind of came out of the process at the confluence, more close to the river, but kind of a network of these more open type shelters, as well as four-season buildings, recognizing that trails aren't just in the warm months. You have outdoor, whether it's cross-country skiing, just general year-round use as well too. So thinking about both the east and the west as locations that might have some level of four-season, whether it was as simple as a toilet or a little more elaborate that we'll talk about here for year-round programming and use. And then going back to that noise and sound and the visibility of thinking about earthwork and landforms as being one of those places that starts to define a place, make it a better place, but also could start to be a place in itself, whether it's a sledding hill in the winter or a place to go to the top of the hill and get grand views, or to be at the bottom of the hill and be in a quiet, secluded place for passive recreation. And then some of those moments, whether it's, again, piers or docks or wayfinding and signage, and it's just simple things like, furnishings and bike changing stations. Again, recognizing that this is also a park on a regional trail system, that there could be some of those sort of creature comforts that we put into this park that are part of those moments for folks who are coming through here, not just to here. And then, that loud and clear voice about art and identity, thinking about ways we can start to make this a unique experience within Oshkosh, within the region. Again, its proximity to 41, the visibility of that, how do we think about it, working, whether the park itself is art or whether it's a place to collect art and showcase it. So I think the last time I was in front of everybody here, we were kind of at the alternatives phase. We took all of those threads and moments and spaces and knit them together into three unique alternatives. They all sort of did the same, they all achieved that mission of connectivity and such, but they did it in very different stylistic ways. As is typically the process, we ended up with a hybrid of those. I think a lot of folks liked some of the larger open spaces on the west side, more of the intimate kind of spaces on the east side that sort of activated the couple of parks there. So we spent the last couple of months knitting that together into one preferred alternative, which is what I will walk you through today. So what we have today, this is sort of a hybrid of the Oshkosh Corps plans as well as the existing golf course. So this is really the sort of the canvas that we are painting on as in our master plan. And this is the master plan that I will walk you through. So kind of, again, going back to that strong desire for connectivity and trails, this is, again, a very robust network of pedestrian, bike trails, multi-use purpose trails that start to create some longer loops. They start to, the blue is your existing or soon-to-be existing Riverwalk, and then it starts to knit together with a series of other, park trails that create, longer loops around the entire park, smaller loops kind of within the east and the west zones, or even smaller loops within those that might go around a lawn or water body or something special as well too. So again, as a pedestrian, I have all those experiences. So this park is unique every time I come out here. It starts to tie together with a series of parking lots and trailheads, which again, recognizing that this might be a launching pad onto your regional trail system, not just a destination, but also those parking lots would double for park use, have trailhead uses, toilets, things like that at each end of the park. So trying to think about how this is a fully functioning trail network. And those orange circles you see there are sort of decision points or maybe places for wayfinding, things like that as well too, recognizing that it's a fairly large system and might be good to give people a grounding of where they're going once they're in that system. Thinking about, again, how we would use the park itself. So a series of sort of landscape and water being really the driver. So the kind of the brighter green are those series of multi-purpose lawns, flex lawns for picnicking, large events, small events, depending on which side of the park and what your purpose is, depending on the seasons, knit together with this water and ecosystem habitat. So we definitely played around with a lot of schemes with that water. We ended up really working with the lakes pretty much as they are today on the golf course, but thinking about the areas between those, that we could knit them together with landscape, subtle grading, so that they could really feel like a connected greenway system around the water, but also perhaps with some of the grading that could actually even be a little bit better for some of the function they serve in terms of flood management and such as. So thinking about them, visually connected, and maybe at high water times they physically connect. But we definitely kind of backed off from the idea of really fully connecting all the water, as in some of the other alternatives we're showing earlier. And then this really kind of breaks down into 3 zones that I'll get into a little more detail on. So west, recognizing that it's a very large area, it's got a great proximity to the lake. It doesn't have neighbors for the most part. In terms of residential, you're next to the hotel, you're next to the expressway. You can maybe be a little larger, a little louder over there. In terms of maybe the lawns are a little larger there, so we created a large central flex lawn. Has a series of small shelters along it. It does have a toilet parking lot and a toilet building to the south that would activate that, and then recognizing again that noise from the expressway and the desire to have some of those dramatic landforms in public art, it starts to show the idea of maybe a larger landform and hill along the west side of that space that would both define that open lawn space. It might protect it from some of the noise, but it also might provide some flexibility for, it could be a seating hill, it could be sledding, things like that as well too, and then connected with a nice series of trails that really make this real. In a way, this is almost its own park in itself, and then it connects into the broader park through the outer loop of trails. Kind of moving to the east, there's a East Park North and a East Park South. This is the south piece, so this is really looking at a couple of things. One is it shows you kind of again how that water system knits together as it moves up towards the north, but it also starts to show how we could sort of finish Mary Jewel as well. So building upon the athletic field, some of the pump station with the toilets that are there as well. It adds a small parking lot. It adds a flex lawn space and some adventure play. So from a parent perspective, I've sort of got it all in that location, but it really kind of keeps it intimate in its own neighborhood park that's adjacent to a regional park, which was something, again, we heard pretty loud and clear. And then moving to the north, you kind of keep working your way up the water system, up the trails, and the centerpiece here is a four-season building that would anchor this area. It really becomes the nice sort of hinge between the new park as well as Rainbow itself. Again, you've had some great investments there. So this building is at a great location to sort of be that hinge that serves both of those. We've put some parking that would be shared there, some flex lawns that would be shared there. The trails connect. So while this, again, is really part of Lakeshore, it really becomes part of that connective tissue. When I talked about the edges, this is a good example of how this has been designed to tie together two of the parks into one Lakeshore and river experience, recognizing that it's at the confluence. So that four-season building is part of that, as well as the idea of a pier that would be would engage the water. We are showing what we're calling a boating beach here. So the thought there is would be a cobble beach where you could land and launch a kayak. It wouldn't be for swimming, but it would be a place to at least engage the water. You could hang out down there. You could have maybe some sand behind that for beach volleyball, things like that as well too. But it was really kind of more of that boating beach, boating pier type idea here, fishing, things like that, more water recreation versus swimming. So a lot going on in this zone, which is, you'll see later, is really targeted as the first phase, hopefully, of the project. So again, as I mentioned, the centerpiece of that would be a four-season building. These are a couple images from comparable projects that we've worked on. One over in Oak Creek, one in actually Toledo, on a river in Toledo. Roughly, again, four seasons, roughly 2,500 square feet. Would be able to host events, roughly 100 or so folks would have the ability, a catering kitchen, so you could host some events with food. Would also have restrooms that would serve events here, but also serve the park around it as well, too. So looking at that whole plan, again, there's a lot going on. We recognize this was not going to be a one, first phase, make it all happen. There's a lot of benefits to phasing beyond just money side of things. I think to get the park open, getting folks out there from a trail perspective, learning how you want to use the park. I think giving Ray and his team the ability to sort of learn every couple of years of what people want to see, how it's working, be able to add something fresh in the park is always a good practice in park design. So we've identified a number of, I would say these are both, you can think of these as phases or bundles depending on preferences from the community or how funding might come across. So, for example, there's a phase that talks about the water and shoreline. That might be a really good phase to start to identify grant funding that, if that were to happen sooner, maybe that becomes an earlier phase, but it's a nice cohesive bundle that could be done as one project. That was sort of our thinking. But phase one, we definitely were thinking about as a project that could happen right away. And that's really that four-season building at the end of Pinoqua. And then I'll walk you through each of these phases, but the thought was this is about a 5, bundle or phase project. We, with a grand total of a little over $10 million, we have also applied a 35% contingency to all the numbers. We're at a very early stage here. We've got planning numbers here. So we're using our best practices from other projects here, but these are construction documents at this point too. So we feel this is a good budgeting number from a planning perspective. It's focused more on the construction numbers. This does not include design fees, for example, but it's more focused on what it would cost to build the project. So the first phase, we're calling the Pinoqua Terminus Improvements. It would have that 4-season building. It would have a series of spaces around the building for just general activities around the building, outdoor events, things like that. It would have a splash pad, which would be a nice feature to get wet without going in the lake or river. We're seeing, again, more and more waterfront parks. That's a great feature to have from a year-round perspective. Much easier to operate than a pool as well, too. Would have some parking and drop-off improvements. It would have a couple of flex lawns, again, that could be used for a variety of different types of events, either actively or passively programmed, depending on how parks wanted to use those. And it would start to look kind of the first attempt at starting to bring that new character to the ponds as well, too, that would start to define this space. So a nice cohesive first phase with about a $3.8 million budget target, which with contingency included in that. The nice thing about this, again, it really does start to tie together the two parks with what's happening at Rainbow next door. The next phase starts to kind of hop west and try to get at least the first phase of that turned on. So the thought there was really transform the golf course into more of this passive space with a central open flexible lawn space, the first piece of the trails. So we wouldn't build all of the water and all the landforms, but we would start to get the character feeling like a cohesive park over there. We also would start to bring on that first piece of, we're calling the cultural history recognition area. There's a kind of a high ridge of oaks as you, up in the northeast corner, where, again, historically we're seeing that would be a place where you might see more artifacts, things like that. I think the Oshkosh Corporation's development also had some of those findings as well, too. So we haven't defined exactly what that is, but we really feel like that's a good area to kind of focus, a significant development there that might focus more on culture and history. And then, I don't know if this does have a pointer or not. Yeah, it does. It's not, but it would be that. There you go. Thank you. Okay. Then the next phase or bundle starts to look at the water itself, both the internal lakes, starting to think about that character, minor grading along them, landscaping, so they start to resemble that linear connected system that you saw in the historic photograph, and really starts to tie the park together. It also looks at the same idea along the lake and river shoreline itself, starting to soften up some of the rubble edges and hard revetted edges as well, into something a little more engaging, more of a park edge that engages the lake. And then the fourth phase starts to look at the rest of the west, so starting to bring in the landforms, the landscape, and the support amenities, some of the site structures, parking lot, things like that would be part of this phase. And then finally, the same treatment to the east. So this would start to finish off that piece that's adjacent to Mary Jewel, start to finish the rest of the landscaping, sculpting, trail work, things like that to the east. So at the end of all of that, this is what the master plan looks like. We happy to take any questions at this point?
Questions? Go ahead, John, and then Kathy.
When it came to the fishing and implementing the watercraft and whatnot, did we get any input from, say, like Otter Street Fishing Club, who works well with, with the city and the community on things like that, or any other groups like that?
They were on our list for mailings, emailings, and inviting to the meetings. I know I wouldn't say that any of those really provided a lot of input on as far as the fishing goes, but we did hear from some of the neighbors as well as a number of residents that we'd like to have access out into the water because we know it's a decent fishing spot.
Yeah.
So that the pier that goes out, it wouldn't go far out into the current, but it allows people to get out a little bit into the water, but also looking at personal watercraft, the kayaks and canoes. But back to your point, the fishing groups were on our list of people that we were sending blasting emails to.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy.
Yes, comment for you.
For me or for Ray?
No, for you right now.
Sure, yeah.
I'll get Ray in a minute.
Okay, sure.
I just want to thank you for you and your colleagues, your visionary approach, and exciting plan.
Oh.
We've never had anything this good in the city of Oshkosh plan, and I really appreciate that. And as you know, I was just about at every single meeting.
No, that's hugely appreciated.
Monitoring you carefully.
No, I thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to shine. You gave us a chance to soar on this thing too. So
Yeah.
right back at you.
So
Appreciate
more
it.
or less, I think it's great, and we can argue the details with the city council as we move along.
That's the Ray point.
So I think that's all I had to say to you.
Okay.
So thank you.
Other thoughts or comments or questions?
Of Ray.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of the extensive emphasis on nature. I think that's something that we don't have a whole lot of in our city parks currently, and I'm really enthusiastic for the amount of language in here that emphasizes the support for that. I was hoping that maybe you could elaborate a little bit. I know maybe it's preliminary and you kind of left it some of the later concepts of art and culture, but it is a pretty important Native American site, and so that is something that is going to be an important part. I see it's in the plan for 6 and 7, but then I really didn't see it after that, and so I wasn't sure if any of those activities were specific to that at all.
Again, I would think as we get into more detail of design, those would start to flesh themselves out a little more, a bit of what they actually are and exactly where. But I think the thought is it's knit throughout the plan.
Sure. I mean, I for what it's worth, my preference or feeling would be that it is something that's kind of absolutely necessary,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
some sort of recognition. I was curious if you could elaborate more on the inclusion of the splash pad. I know that they're very popular. I was curious how that fit in with kind of the whole natural scheme. They're kind of juxtaposed, and so.
Sure. Well, I think it fits in very nice. The nice thing in that zone around the building, that's probably one of the more refined areas. I would say that's almost becoming more your traditional park character. You've got the building there, the flex lawns, the parking as well too. So, that's where you see more of the activity in that kind of play space. So we kind of felt that was a nice complement to the building. Sure. And started to make it a much more active space, because again you've got especially having the toilets and all that as well too. That's a nice complement for that.
Right. I noted that that the start was more of your traditional park, and I would hope that at that point when that's ready, that there are good visuals for the vision for the rest of the park, because I would hope that folks don't get the idea and then that ends up swaying the rest of the plan, where we start to slip away from some of that natural feature and kind of do another, not that our other parks aren't great, but to offer something different and more unique, that would be wonderful. I did notice on your slide 16, in particular the lower right image, and a lot of them had pretty immense or dense trees. And I know that from early on conversations, the concept of wooded pathways of sorts kind of regularly came up in discussion. And I know, dozens of people that I talk to, that is something that is outside of maybe Asylum Bay sorely lacking. And the absence of kind of a woodsy type feel. I see in your front cover you have a picture in the top left of maybe a little bit of a more dense thing. But then on the images that you have, the trees are relatively sparse. I mean, like a wood setting is at mature is going to have like 150 trees per acre. I mean, I'm not expecting you to have 10,500 trees, but really that's been something that's I don't know if Ray would say that's been a point that they've been advocating, but it's a sentiment that has gotten out to the public that there may be some wooded opportunities for natural trails that really aren't anywhere else in any city park. And I hope that more attention to that will be than what is visibly present in the current layout. So.
Sure, yeah, I think, I know, again, kind of going back to that northeast corner, you've got the grove of large oaks up there. So, you've got, I think it's where that picture is from. I think the riparian corridors are a pretty obvious opportunity to, one is to knit that around some of the larger trees you have already, right? But also start to think about a real reforestation program along those corridors as well too. So it could, one is to, bring that next generation into what you have already. Don't wipe everything out that you have today.
Right.
Try to bring some new in there as well too, and start to think about, what that approach is. So we bring in, the whole range of sizes and species, so that can be a bit of an educational experiment out here and create that. So I think those green water corridors would be a logical place, and they would actually, help do a nice job of framing off those meadows as well too.
Sure.
So I think it's point well taken.
I was really surprised, or pleasantly surprised. I was up this summer in St. Paul, and there's a park up there where to get to it was maybe just a 1 minute stretch, but it was dense woods, and you all you see is woods from this outside section you get through, and there's a glorious urban park that, I mean, it's really wonderful. And just to have that woods was really, really pleasantly surprised. And I get it, we're not St. Paul, but that St. Paul has something like that was we could do that too if we wanted. And I think that is something, and I'm not alone, there's a lot of folks that have that sentiment.
No, I think there are definitely some zones that aren't shown here that, as we get into more detailed design, could take on that character, could add another ecosystem without a doubt.
Sure. Last one that I have then is, you mentioned pier, and I know that a pier that has handicap accessibility features is hard to do in a neighborhood where there's people that live across the street and they don't want to have their view of the water blocked, but maybe that's not the case here, and I would strongly encourage, at least for consideration, that you have handicap accessible railing on the side so that it's a pier that multiple people can use.
Absolutely. I think our mindset, the whole park would take on a universal accessibility approach to it. And so piers, trails, structures as well that would be a driver.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Just a quick shout out to all the commissions and boards that worked on this. I think it's a real community effort, not with the survey, with public meetings, but commissions that put in a lot of time. I think it's really nice what you guys came up with. And you obviously utilize their feedback. Do you have anything else for the job? Thank you, sir.
Questions?
Yep. It sounds like we have questions for the Parks Director. Kathy, you want to start?
Sure. The Riverwalk Trail, that's under construction right now, maybe I don't know if it's done or not. When will it be completed?
With the cold weather or the cold season starting so quickly, they could not get the two bridges placed. So it's completed up to the western edge of Oshkosh Corp property, I believe, and then it's closed from there to I-41. And then in spring, once the weather is cooperating, they can get the two bridges installed. So late spring, early summer would be our guess based on weather.
Okay, and then it would be functional and people can use it
Correct.
and get over to Rainbow Park. I mean,
Yes.
there won't be an extension of the trail yet into Rainbow Park.
That's correct. It'll end at the end of the, at Pinoqua.
Yeah, okay. I'm a little bit concerned with phasing. I understand why the consultants and we are phasing it, because it's a $10 million project. It's huge. And so biting off pieces, at least to think about, I think is a good idea. But I'm really concerned that the city has not funded parks well in the past, as you know. You have to deal with a tight budget. And I'm concerned that we'll maybe get the first phase done and completed, and I don't know what the rest of the park is gonna look like while we're waiting for these phases. So I guess I'm gonna challenge the city council and the community to figure out a way to get this thing done faster, step up our game. Challenge Oshkosh to help meet this plan, major fundraising through the Oshkosh Foundation, private donors, and it won't happen in 1 year, of course. It probably couldn't, because the construction would be a phenomenal problem. I understand that. But I really think this plan needs to be a significant community focus, and that we can't drag it out 10 years. I don't even want to drag it out 5 years, maybe 3. And that's a visionary kind of an approach, but this is a visionary kind of a plan, and it's a really important park. So I will be challenging the city council to do that and keep their feet to the fire. Put a little bit more money into parks for a change.
I'm
you,
guessing
Kathy.
Ray won't disagree with that.
I think
So, thank you.
you have 3 more minutes, Kathy.
I'm finished, thank you.
Any other questions for Parks Director? Yeah.
Ray, have we looked into anything as far, especially with the permanent buildings on each end that are going to be using it? We looked into sponsorships from local businesses, from local groups, and things like that. Just trying to help keep things set for the future, so that way, okay, yeah, we're getting this up front, but now we know it's going to keep going because we have these groups that, or the companies, even with Oshkosh Corp, because they're right there. You know, just saying, hey, do you want to sponsor the splash pad for the kids, or, you know, little things like that.
Yeah, and we're, as Greg said to a couple other questions, we're very early in that process yet. Now that we're getting closer, and I expect this will be going to the council for approval next Tuesday, that'll be the next step, to start having some of those conversations on. We know what phase 1 is hopefully going to entail. What are some of those pieces that we can do some fundraising for? And Kathy, like you said, if we can get some fundraising for the splash pad and a couple other items, that's more money that could go into the future phases. So definitely something we'll be looking at. I've already had some individuals contact me about some donations and some sponsorships. So definitely something we'll be working on.
Yeah, because we have a really giving community with our business community in this city, so it's a good chance to utilize it and have everybody, you know, kind of show off the new park and help their business along the way.
Sure.
Other thoughts? Anybody else here from the public to speak to this item today? As long as- All right, seeing none, back to the commission. We need a motion to accept, adopt the findings, et cetera. Oh, pardon me.
He's just leaving my pointer up there.
I believe we need a motion to adopt the
Motion to
findings.
adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
All right, any discussion? Beyond what we've already talked about? Seeing none, let's call a roll.
Erickson. Aye. Ford.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Heaver.
Aye.
Perry. Mitchell.
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
Kolbali.
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
I'm told there's a director's report, that's an invisible link there.
Yeah, you can't see it, but I just have 2 things I wanted to state real quickly for the commission. First item, we did get unanimous consent on, there goes my pen, moving forward with the tablets. Now it is a 2020 budget item, so timing of when we get those, will probably be very early in 2020. Especially as you can see, there are some issues with getting you paper packets through the Postal Service. They were mailed out over a week ago. This is 2 meetings in a row that things didn't make it to you in less than a week. So going digital will hopefully solve some of those problems. Staff's talked a little bit. We'll probably look at hand delivering the packets from now until we can get that digital implemented. We can't have you not getting your packets. We'll probably look at hand delivering. Hopefully early 2020 we solve that issue with some digital solutions. Second item I wanted to kind of give you a heads up on is Brian has been promoted to our planner position. So you're going to be seeing quite a bit more of Brian here at Plan Commission. He's going to be undertaking some of the more complex plan development, some of those issues that you'll see. So congrats to Brian.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's it.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Close the workshop.